Hi, my name is Chuck Gardner, and this is another one of my boring golf tutorials. I started my career professionally as a photographer in college. I had been a scuba diver in high school, and that got me interested in underwater photography. I brought my underwater camera to Knox College, which I attended on an advanced placement scholarship, got a free tuition college education from the state of Illinois. And I was studying in the basement of my dorm doing laundry, and I saw these guys going into this room down in the basement of my dorm with 35mm cameras. And I asked, where are you going? What's up? Oh, well, the student darkroom's here. We work for the newspaper. And I found out that the newspaper paid $3 for every picture published because the college, they wanted to encourage capitalism. $3 was almost 2 times the minimum wage at that point, which was $1.60 an hour. So I say, hey, well, this is an easy way to make some money. So I started taking pictures. I got a key to the darkroom from the college administrator and started taking pictures. And I went to the editor of the newspaper, senior student, and tried to sell my pictures of, people, campus life and things like that. He wasn't interested. So then one day I just happened to be there. I knew that the newspaper closed on Wednesdays and, they might need filler. So I'd always show up on Wednesday afternoon. So I show up on Wednesday afternoon, the phone rings, he hangs up the phone and says, my staff photographer can't make it. Can you go over to the gym and shoot a picture of the cheerleaders? Well, there's 6 most, preppy girls in the school, sorority members. I went over there with my underwater camera, that's all I had, and I walk into the gym and the maintenance workers have this huge scaffold of changing lights in the ceiling. So I say, hey, can I borrow your scaffold? I get up on the scaffold, shoot down with the cheerleaders looking up at the ceiling, beautiful light in their faces. The editor loved the picture, bought those. The next picture I took, I laid on my stomach on the floor with them on their stomachs, propped up on their chins for 2 different perspectives. And then I shot the normal shot. Well, the editor bought all 3 of them, and I got my first $12 professional paycheck as a photographer. And, it got me thinking, well, hey, this is not a bad way to make a living. So I invested in another camera. And by the end of my first semester, I had gotten published in the newspaper, had gotten a picture of mine on the cover of the literary journal. And I found out that my geology professor was sponsoring this off-campus program called Farm Term. So what I did is I put in an application to Farm Term. I had been going on geology field trips and taking my camera and taking pictures, and he'd seen them, I'd given him some. So he knew I could take pictures. So I made the pitch that I would document the Farm Term project as one of my projects. Now, the only catch was that the Farm Term was only open to 3rd and 4th year students. But, I never let obstacles like that stand in my way. And so what the professors did is they got an exception from the dean of students to let me participate as a freshman. So I spent March through May of 1971 up on farms in Wisconsin photographing the Farm Term. And 25 years later, my photos were used in the 25-year reunion book. And then 50 years later, my picture is on the cover of the 50th year reunion book. The group stayed together all these years because it was such an outstanding experience. 15 students living on farms. We were like hippies with adult supervision, except the adults left at 5 o'clock to go home to their families. So it was a really great experience, and it's one of the things that gave me the confidence the following year to drop out of college and move to Washington, D.C. and try to do it as a pro. And that's how I got my career started. But in college, one of the things that made me successful was I went to a Chicago bookstore to get new camera equipment for Farm Term, and I saw these books by Ansel Adams. There's actually five books in the series. I didn't buy the one on artificial lighting, but these are a primer in systematic approach process control, and it was the first time that I had really focused on doing anything systematic. Photography in itself has variables. You have to control the time and the temperature, and Kodak had a system that they developed where you could take pictures under any light, and then you went back to the dark room, and then you figured out what grade of paper you needed to print on the negatives. Adams took a different approach. He very meticulously measured the range of the light, or guessed it based on just experience. Like today is overcast. This is F 5.6 lighting, and it's about 11 or 12 stops of dynamic range. Well, you know, once you learn that under this lighting condition, it becomes part of your DNA. Well, he systematized that in a series of 5 books, which is like doing, 5-minute YouTube videos to get more clicks and ad revenue. But it gave me a systematic approach to photography, which I applied to just about everything I've done ever since. Now, one of the other principles that I was introduced to in business management books, I never actually read Sun Tzu's Art of War, but it's constantly referred to in MBA textbooks and management textbooks, and also it's used in military academies. And Sun Tzu had a very systematic formula for problem solving, and that is you start with a goal that's attainable. You have to have an attainable goal, something that's realistic within your resources. Then the most important thing you want to do after establishing the goal is you need to sit down and actually write out at least 5 criteria for success. What is going to successfully achieve the goal? Well, in a golf swing, I looked at a golf swing, and the number one paramount thing I thought was power, but it turned out that after I read Hogan's book and did his swing drill and realized that I was falling off balance the faster I swung the club, I realized that balance is the most paramount criteria in the swing. Power comes later. Balance begets accuracy, which begets power once you can hit accurately. But you develop the criteria for success, then, now here's the thing about golf. Golf has developed dozens of different strategies that are successful. The style of Hogan is different than the style of Nicklaus that replaced it, and then we had the X Factor and the reverse C, and golf instruction has gone down all these different rabbit holes over the years, and partially that's in response to the equipment, something else I'm going to cover. But what you need to do is try every strategy and evaluate it against the criteria for balance and power. Does this create balance and power? Well, yeah, they all create balance and power to some degree, but then you need to look at what creates the power most efficiently and keeps you in the best balance. Now, in the previous video, I showed what's revolutionary to probably most people, the fact that you can hinge the club and waggle it freely by creating a fulcrum with the middle 2 fingers of your trail hand. And when you put your hand in the Varden grip, it forms the perfect cradle to do that to. All you need to do is understand the concept, and instead of swinging it like this and then cocking it like this, you just use the fulcrum and it's much easier to waggle. So, to my logical mind, that is a more efficient and effective way to achieve the objective of generating kinetic energy via acceleration in the club head and getting it up to the top effortlessly, which Hogan did. Hogan had metal spikes in his shoes, and he put an extra spike in his back foot and the instep so his back foot would not spin out. Why would it spin out? Because the way he turned in his back foot, when he turned his hips, it put so much torque in his back leg, if he didn't have those metal spikes, his back foot would spin out. And that's exactly what happens if you try to do the Hogan swing today in spikeless shoes. You really can't do it without the metal spikes. And that gets to how the equipment has affected the mindset and strategies for swings. Just the same way as the shafts going from hickory to metal to carbon fiber, and the heads going from solid metal or solid hickory, high mass heads, to low mass heads that are hollow and made of titanium. They require different strategies. Now, where does technique fit into this picture? That was the genius of Sun Tzu's critical thinking structure. What people typically do when they start a new sport is they go out and buy equipment. They buy the tools, and then they go and learn the techniques. But the problem I have with a lot of golf instruction and education in general is that the techniques don't teach the student the overall context of the strategy that they fit in. That is true of YouTube instruction on golf. They will show you how-to techniques, and those how-to techniques are specific to a specific strategy. Like right now, the conventional thinking is you should swing the club out wide and then not cock it very much and then bring it down. I'm not sure what the rationale behind that is, because if you understand how a mechanical governor works, a mechanical governor on a steam engine has two arms that move up and down with centrifugal force. Well, when the arms are in, you spin fast, and when the arms are out, you have a lot of inertia to overcome the spin. So if you've got your arms out here, it's going to be really hard to turn your hips to the top. But if your first move is to whip your club head mass close to your body, see how much easier it is to turn your body? So to me, it's a more logical way and more efficient way to swing. Why don't people do that? Why don't, for instance, they do a chopping down motion into the ground in their swing? Well, it has to do with the fact that clubs were made out of hickory shafts. And if you were to chop down on a ball with a hickory shaft, well, the same thing would happen as if you were using an axe with a diameter on the shaft of that big. You would break the head off at the hosel. But now we have metal clubs with metal hosels. This is a Ping Eye 2. This is one of the best balanced clubs made. And it has a hosel that is very strong. I can take this club and literally beat it into the ground without worrying about it breaking. And what is happening during the swing? Well, you need to think not in terms of swing speed, how fast the club head is going, But I started thinking in terms of kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is created by the movement of mass. And it's a counterintuitive formula. Physics, a lot of things in physics are counterintuitive. Like the first physics experiment you do in grade school is you sit on a stool and hold a spinning bicycle wheel like this, right? And then what you do is the teacher has you turn the wheel like this, and all of a sudden you're spinning around on the chair because of the gyroscopic precession that's created by that spinning wheel. Well, the same thing happens in a golf ball. But the takeaway here is that kinetic energy is created by, is increased by the square of the velocity. The significance of that is if you increase the speed of the club head 2 times, you get 4 times the kinetic energy. That is why this is more efficient than this, because I'm moving the club head 10 times as fast. That's 100 times more kinetic energy built up in this club head than if I bring it back like this. The physics makes more sense to do this in the physics than it does to do this. This also will throw you off balance more. This, I can do this all day and turn and keep my feet together and not fall off balance because I don't have to deal with all this unbalancing force. The same is true with using a grip that folds your arms in both ways. This folding of the arms, particularly this one here, this is what allows a easily balanced finish because you're only dealing with the mass of one arm. So that's my approach to golf and why it's different than conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom is built on the techniques that were used by sensing golfers. They have athletic intuition, but not a lot of intellectual knowledge about the physics. And you have to swing a hickory club like this because any other way you swing it will break it. And when this transition was made to metal clubs, Byron Nelson figured out when he was using a metal shafted driver for the first time that if he dropped the club, he could get bend loading in the shaft. And what that bend loading does in the shaft, if you can maintain the lag all the way down to the point where it rotates around the hands, that adds, this stores kinetic energy, the bending stores kinetic energy. If you can keep the bend in the shaft until the club head smacks the ball in the ass, then you have used that kinetic energy that's stored in the shaft effectively, efficiently. But what happens to a lot of people here is when they get to the swing down here, the shaft starts bending forward. That's the club head accelerating past the hands. So what you have to do is keep the hands moving faster than the club head so the bend stays in the shaft, and then release it instantaneously at the moment the club face hits the ball. The ideal timing for that is that the shaft is bent back and it bends forward just as the face hits the ball, so that forward bending action works to compress the ball. That's how I'm thinking of the swing in terms of the physics and the kinetic energy transfer, not club head speed and whatever. I focus on the goal of getting kinetic energy into the club head and down into the ball. And that I'm going to conclude there and pick up that discussion in the next video.